I'd like to welcome everybody to the study plan session for international CAs who wish to achieve their CPA designation. My name is Michael Levy. I'm a co-director of the PASS program. Later on, you'll be meeting my partner, Ira Walfish, who will be doing a portion of this presentation. Let me begin by explaining what we'd like to cover in this presentation. There are 5 parts to the presentation. We're going to start with part 1, in which we'll give you a bird's eye view of the CPA program as it relates to an international student. We'll then move on to part 2, where we'll talk about the focus on case writing versus technical in the study process for the CP. In part 3, my partner, Ira Walfish, will go through a detailed study plan. We're very, very strong believers here at PASS that in order to pass an exam as extensive as a CP, you need a very structured study plan, and Ira will give you an example of such a plan. Obviously, everybody needs to do their own study plan that's tailored to their own needs. However, it'll give you a very good starting point for producing such a plan. In part 4, we'll talk about how to debrief a case. At PASS, we believe that in order to pass the CP, case writing practice is essential. However, in order to improve in your case writing, it's not sufficient to simply write a number of cases. You have to have an effective means of debriefing the cases after you've written them so that you can continually improve. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about who we are in part 5, and then we'd like to present to you a specific CP program that we designed specifically with international students in mind. We'll go through that in some detail so you'll have an idea of how this program could help you pass your CP. Before we get into any further detail, let's just make clear the purpose of this session. As you can see from this slide, the purpose is very simple. We'd like to show you how to study effectively so that you don't have to do the CP more than once, so you can pass it on your first attempt. Let's start with part 1 of the presentation, in which I will give you just a very general description of the CPA program. We won't spend very much time on this, but in order to understand how to study for the CP, you'd obviously have to have the big picture first. So let's first present the big picture in terms of what the CPA program entails, what the CP entails, and then we can focus on how to study. If you take a look at the slide you see in front of you, this is a summary of what a typical Canadian student would go through in order to pass his or her CPA. A typical student would finish university, and they would first do Core 1 and Core 2. Core 1 focuses primarily on financial accounting. Core 2 focuses primarily on management accounting. Students would attend each of these 2 modules and write an exam at the end of each module. Then they would get to the electives. For the electives, there are 4 possible elective modules one can take: assurance, performance management, tax, and finance. If you're not interested in getting your public accountant's license, you have no intention of pursuing a career in public accounting, you can choose any of these 2 electives, 2 out of 4 of these choices. So you can choose assurance, performance management, tax, or finance. Any 2 would be fine. If you want your public accountant's license, you are planning a career, or you think you might want a career in public accounting, you'd have to choose electives in assurance and tax. Similar to the case of the core modules, you would first attend the module for a number of weeks, and at the end of that, you would then write an exam. After getting through Core 1 and Core 2 in the 2 elective modules, you would then move on to Capstone 1, which I'll explain in a little more detail in a moment. But for now, Capstone 1 is a big business case that you'll work on as part of a group. You would then move on to Capstone 2, which entails practice case writing for the CP. And then finally, the last step would be to move on to the CP. After passing the CP, you're now a CPA. Now, for a typical Canadian student, this would take 2 years from start to finish, because you have quite a few, again, it doesn't have to take 2 years, but typically would take 2 years from start to finish, given that there are numerous modules the student needs to work through till he or she can get their CPA. So 2 years would be very typical. One of the nice things about being an international student is you don't have to enter the program at the very beginning. You would be exempt from Core 1, Core 2, as well as both of the electives. So you're entering the program already at Capstone 1, which allows you to get through the program far more quickly. Also, most of the weeding out that takes place, where they try to weed students out, where students are expected to fail, most of that takes place in Core 1, almost all of it takes place, I should say, in Core 1, Core 2, and the electives. So you come into the process after the vast majority of weeding out has already taken place, which gives you a large advantage. What I would like to do now is just give you an understanding of what you'll be going through at Capstone 1, Capstone 2, and then finally on the CP itself. As I mentioned before, the main focus of Capstone 1 is a large business case which you'll work on as part of a group. You'll be assigned to a group with a number of other students to work on this big business project. You'll be dealing with high-level business decisions rather than nitty-gritty technical. Capstone 1 is not intended to be terribly technical. Capstone 1 also prepares candidates for the CP. The CP, as you'll see later, comprises 3 days of exams. The first day of the CP will build on the case that you will have worked in during the Capstone One module. It'll be almost like a continuation of the Capstone One module. In the Capstone One module, you will be working on a particular case that's facing certain strategic issues. On day 1 of the CP, you'll be encountering the same company as you had in your Capstone One module, but now they're facing some new issues that you would have to deal with. So day 1 of the CP builds on the Capstone One module. What are the key aspects of Capstone 1? As part of a group, you're going to write a major report that's intended to simulate the type of high-level report that one would present to a board of directors or a team of senior executives. You'll also be making an oral presentation to the simulated board of directors or the simulated team of senior executives. Again, this is all done as part of a group. Nothing is done as an individual. Finally, the simulated board or team of executives will then have a chance to pepper your team with questions which you'd be expected to answer. Again, all of this is meant to simulate the sort of high-level presentation one would do in real life. The way that the Capstone One module is structured is as follows. In mid-May, you would start with a 2-day weekend workshop where you'll have an opportunity to meet the other team members. You'll have a chance to develop team agreements with these members. You'll practice your presentation skills, given the importance of the presentation you do at the end of the module. You'll come up with an action plan, etc. The module is relatively time-consuming. You can expect to spend about 10 to 15 hours per week working on this report with the other members of the team and working on the presentation. And then at the end, as we mentioned earlier, you'll be submitting your report and doing your group presentation. Now, this, as I mentioned before, this module is not intended to weed people out. The vast majority of people will pass Capstone 1. Quite frankly, as long as you do what you're told, you should pass Capstone 1. There's absolutely no reason to fail Capstone 1. So again, that, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the advantages of only starting the program with Capstone 1. Now, in theory, a group could fail because they didn't do what they were told. They submitted a draft and they were told by the facilitator to make certain changes and they ignored it. So again, if you really try hard, you can fail, but again, very, very rare. So the whole group could fail if they don't do what they're supposed to do. In theory, an individual student could also fail if the group feels that that student did not pull his or her weight. But again, extremely rare for anybody to fail Capstone 1. Now let's move on to Capstone 2. After you finish Capstone 1, you'll have a break for a couple of weeks, and then you'll move on, and toward the end of July, you'll move on to Capstone 2, which will take you almost right through until the CP. Capstone 2 has 3 primary objectives. Number 1, to continue the development of your enabling competencies, your soft skills, your soft case writing skills. And effectively, it's intended to help candidates prepare for all 3 days of the CP. So during Capstone 2, you can expect to write practice cases, both for day 1 as well as for day 2 and 3 of the CP. For the purpose of practicing for day 2 and 3 of the CP, the practice cases you write will generally be prior CPs that were written by students since in the last few years. As you know, the CP only started in 2015, so there aren't a huge number of years, and you'll be focusing on these past CPs, writing them as practice cases during Capstone 2. There isn't going to be any technical per se as part of Capstone 2. They're not going to sit there and have technical sessions. However, what you will be doing in Capstone 2 is taking the technical knowledge that you've already acquired and applying it to cases. There's no examination at the end of Capstone 2, so it's nothing you need to pass. Everybody passes as long as you submit the cases. Even if you don't do very well in the cases you submit, you will pass Capstone 2. There is no examination required to pass Capstone 2. It starts with a 2-day weekend workshop, just like Capstone 1. You'll also likely have to write a multi-case prior to that. A multi-case is a case typically 70, 80, or 90 minutes. The reason it's called a multi-case is it typically will encapsulate a number of different competencies. The workshop you attend, that 2-day workshop, will teach you how to debrief a case, how to analyze a response, and then over the course of the next 7 weeks, you'll be submitting cases each week, practice cases you've written each week. And again, Capstone 2 is a very good opportunity to write practice cases, to get those cases professionally marked, and then there'll also be online webinars where they go over these cases. So effectively, Capstone 2 is designed to give you some case writing practice prior to the CP. Finally, you get to the CP. The CP, as we mentioned before, is 3 days long. Day 1 is based on the Capstone One Module, as we described earlier. Day 2 and Day 3, Day 2 is what we call the roll comp. Day 3 is multis. I'll describe the roll comp in more detail in just a moment, but for now, the roll comp is one big case that's 5 hours long. And then Day 3, you'll be writing multis. Multis, again, in theory, they can be 60 to 90 minutes, but historically, they've been between 70 and 90 minutes. And you'll typically have 3 cases that will add up to 240 minutes. So the comp is one big case, the multis are shorter cases. Over the course of Day 2 and Day 3, I'm going to focus on Day 2 and Day 3 right now, you will be tested on all of the 6 competencies you see on this page: audit and assurance, financial reporting, management accounting, finance, taxation, and strategy and governance. Keep in mind that the Day 1, which focuses on Capstone 1, is not very technical. There they're testing, big picture, high-level business skills rather than nitty-gritty technical. The technical part of the CP is Days 2 and Day 3. On Day 2 and Day 3, you will be expected to achieve depth in 2 areas. And across all other areas, you simply need to achieve breadth. So you would have to have a really intensive knowledge and ability to apply that knowledge at a very high level for 2 areas, for 2 competencies. For the remaining competencies, the level at which you would have to deal with a competency will be much lower. That is what I mean by breadth. Now, if you're interested in being an external auditor, you're thinking of having a career in public accounting, or you're not sure but you'd like to leave open the option of a career in public accounting, in that situation, you're going to want your public accountant's license. In order to get your public accountant's license, the 2 areas in which you have to have an in-depth knowledge, the 2 areas in which you need to achieve depth are going to be assurance and financial reporting. If you're not interested in getting a public accountant's license, say, for example, you have no intention of practicing public accounting. You know right now that you're planning a career in industry. If that, or say a not-for-profit, if that's your intention, then you need to get depth in either financial reporting or management accounting. So unlike the case of the person who wants a public accountant's license, you don't need depth in financial reporting specifically. You can get depth in either financial reporting or management accounting. And then you would need to get depth in any one of the following 4 competencies: assurance, taxation, performance management, or finance. As long as you get depth in one of these 4 areas, you're fine. Now, you do not have to make a choice prior to the CP with regard to whether you will be achieving depth in financial reporting or management accounting. On the CP itself, you would do your absolute best to get depth in both areas. Very risky to try to just achieve depth in one of these 2 areas, because if you don't get it, you'll be in a lot of trouble. So if I were a student on the CP, I'm trying my best to get depth in both financial reporting and management accounting. If I'm fortunate, I'll get depth in both, but if I'm not fortunate, at least I'll hopefully get depth in one. So I don't need to make a choice between financial reporting or management accounting prior to the CP. I do, however, need to make a choice prior to the CP with regard to which of the other 4 competencies I'm going to get depth in. I need to make a choice prior to the CP. Do I want to go for depth in assurance, taxation, performance management, or finance? The reason why I need to make this choice prior to the CP is the role that I'm going to play on day 2 of the CP for the elective or roll comp, it's often referred to as elective comp or roll comp, will differ depending on the depth area I have chosen. Let me explain to you how day 2 of the CP is designed. Day 2 of the CP is a big 5-hour case, but not everybody writes the identical case. A typical day 2 case will test financial accounting and or management accounting. So there will be required in either financial accounting or management accounting or both that every candidate will have to address. So the financial accounting and or management accounting information provided on the roll comp will be the same for all students. But then there will be separate information provided depending on which role you've chosen. So say, for example, I've chosen assurance. I will have a specific appendix that only people who are doing assurance will have to read. And then I will have to address a number of requirements relating to assurance in addition to dealing with financial accounting and or management accounting. If the person next to me has chosen taxation as their role, they will have to deal with the same financial accounting and if the management accounting is tested, the same management accounting required. But all of the remainder of their requirements will be in taxation. So the requirements that I need to address in addition to financial accounting or management accounting or both will depend upon the depth area I've chosen, the competency I've chosen for depth. That is why you need to make this choice prior to the CP. Now, this is only true for day 2 of the CP. Day 3 of the CP, where you're writing multi-cases, everybody will write the exact same cases. There, the cases are not tailored to any particular depth area. That's why on day 3 of the CP, other than financial accounting and management accounting, none of the other competencies will be tested in depth because everybody will be writing the exact same cases. So therefore, it wouldn't be fair to test any particular area in depth. So assurance, taxation, performance management, and finance will not be tested at as high a level as it would be tested on day 2 if you chose one of these areas as your depth area. I hope this provides you with a good understanding of the CP, because before you can study for this exam, you need to have somewhat of an understanding of the nature of the exam that you're writing. Obviously, you'll get a much better understanding of the CP as you begin to write practice cases. Now that we've had an opportunity to look at what the CP entails, I'd like to move on to part 2 of our presentation, where we'll talk about studying from a big picture perspective in terms of emphasis on case writing versus technical. Then my partner, Ira, will give you an actual detailed study plan. So then part 2 is not intended to be very detailed. It's more of a general discussion of what we should be focusing on when we study for the CP. Let's take a look. As was mentioned very early on in the presentation, case writing is at the core of the CP. The CP is just cases, right? I explained day 1 is a case, day 2 is a case, day 3 is a case. It's all cases. There's no multiple choice, no short answer questions. So the ability to write cases effectively, absolutely essential for passing. Therefore, a major focus of your studying has to be practicing your case writing. Now, what Ira and I have found from years of experience is that as important as it is for Canadian students to practice their case writing, it's even more important for international students. Keep in mind that Canadian students typically have more experience with case writing than most international students. Number one, in most universities, if not all, students will have had practice writing cases during their university studies. A typical Canadian student would likely, again, many of them would go through what's called PEP, where they would do the modules. And in each of the modules, they would be writing cases. So by the time it comes time for them to study for the CP, they've already had a fair amount of practice with case writing. What Ira and I have found is that for most international students, and again, this will depend on what country you're coming from, but for most international students we've met, the vast majority, they have very, very little case writing experience coming into the CP. So in order to just catch up with the Canadian students, they need to do a great deal of practice case writing. And it's also not good enough to just start the practice case writing late. If you just start it come the summertime, say you finish Capstone One in July and you say, now I'm ready to start case writing, unfortunately for most people, I think that would be too late. That's why we strongly suggest that you start case writing as early as possible. When Ira presents the study plan to you, you'll see that we already recommend starting your case writing, believe it or not, already this month, already in February. The main focus of your case writing is going to be two things. Number one, past cases. We provide a lot of simulated cases for you to write. And number two, writing past CP cases, and you'll do much of this in Capstone 2. However, if you really want a great shot at passing this exam, we recommend that in addition to writing past CPs, and in addition to writing the past simulated cases, just so you can get more case writing under your belt, that you also write some past UPs. That's why you'll see that in Ira's study plan, he has incorporated some UPs. Again, main focus is not the UPs, it's the CP and past simulated cases. The past simulated cases try very hard to simulate the CP. But in order to give you the opportunity to write additional cases, we also recommend a limited number of UPs. For those of you who are not familiar with what the UP is, the UP was the predecessor exam prior to the CP. Now, we'll warn you in advance that the UP cases are not identical to the CP. There are some differences. The major differences include that the UPs are generally longer than the CPs. The requirements on the UP are less directed. You have to try a lot harder to figure out what you need to do, whereas on the CP, they are very directed. And there are some differences in the evaluation guides. So no question, UPs are not identical to CPs, and that is why, as I mentioned before, your primary focus is on CPs and past simulated cases. As a matter of fact, if you only have limited time, the UPs would be the lowest of the three in terms of priority. But given that, as I mentioned earlier, we want you to practice case writing as much as absolutely possible to supplement the CP case writing and to supplement the past cases. We recommend that you write UP cases, even though they are not identical to the CPs. We recommend you write these UP cases because you can still get a great deal of benefit from these cases, despite the differences in the cases and some of the differences in the evaluation guides for marking the UP. Now, what about technical? The major areas I would recommend that you focus on from a technical perspective is financial accounting and management accounting. You have to keep in mind that these are the two areas that are tested most extensively on the exam, okay? There will be more testing of financial accounting and management accounting than any other area on the CP. Furthermore, everybody is trying to get depth in these areas. As I mentioned earlier, you need to get depth in one of these two areas. However, I would be doing my utmost to get depth in both. Very risky to just focus on one, because again, if you don't get depth in that one, you'll be in a lot of trouble. I just want to mention a couple of technical traps that I would strongly recommend you avoid, because you need to spend your study time as efficiently as possible. You do not want to be wasting time on things that don't warrant time. As an international student, it's very easy to fall into a trap when it comes to tax, because many international students will be worried about tax because tax is so different in the country they come from as compared to Canadian tax. Keep in mind that one of the nice things about the CP is that unless you choose tax as your depth area, and I find that very few international students do so, you don't need to know all the complexities of Canadian tax. As I mentioned earlier, the only time you will have to deal with tax when you're dealing with day 2 and 3 of the CFE, the only time you're going to have to deal with tax is on day 3. On day 2, if you don't choose tax as a depth area, you will not be dealing with tax at all. So it'll only come up on day 3. On day 3, they can only test tax at a breadth level, not a depth level, which means you don't need to know all the complexities of tax planning. You just need to know the basics. You need to know compliance. That means you need to know, how do I compute taxable income for an individual? How do I compute taxable income for a corporation? What is taxable? What is deductible? It's the bread and butter. It's the basics that you need to focus on. Now, for those of you who attend the tax course, you'll see that in the technical binder we provide to you, we will tell you very explicitly what to focus on if you have not chosen tax as your depth area. So we'll give you enough notes to cover everything you would need to know, even if you do want to choose tax as your depth area. But then we'll be very, very specific about what you should not be looking at if you've chosen a depth area other than tax. So you don't end up wasting time dealing with all the complex areas of tax that will not be examinable on day 3 and that you will not have to deal with if you haven't chosen tax as your depth area. So please be careful. You need to spend some time on tax. I'm not going to say otherwise. Just learning the compliance areas does require some time. But please don't overkill this topic at the expense of more important things like case writing. Now, another thing to be careful about, don't overspend time studying audit. Audit is nowhere near as technical an area as, say, tax or financial accounting or even management accounting. A large part of audit should be relatively intuitive, right? Analyzing risk should be relatively intuitive. Coming up with procedures should be relatively intuitive. How do you develop this intuition? Well, for some of you, it may come from work, but for many of you, it'll come from practice case writing. So much of what you need to know in audit, you can pick up through the practice case writing. We will give you technical notes in your technical binder that we provide as part of the past course, but don't overspend time on it. Focus primarily on cases when it comes to learning how to apply audit effectively on the CP. Finance, unless you choose it as a depth area, not tested at a terribly high level on the CP, don't waste a lot of time on it. Again, please go over the notes we give you unless you know finance well already, but don't waste a great deal of time on it. And then finally, when it comes to governance, strategy and governance, keep in mind that on the CP, it is completely non-technical. It is 100% common sense. So I would not spend any time, or virtually any time, studying governance from a technical perspective. How would I pick up my governance? From case writing. And again, the way you pick it up on the cases, the way you do well in governance on the cases, is by not being afraid to use common sense. It is the least technical of all the areas that come up on the CP. Now that I've spoken in general about how to approach the studying for the CP, my partner Ira Walpus will now take over. And what Ira will do is he will go through a detailed sample study plan with you.
Hi everyone, Ira here. I just want to go over and spend a few minutes, I'm sure Michael mentioned this, I want to spend a few minutes going over a possible study plan that international CAs could use. Now, just a couple of quick introductory comments. The whole idea of a study plan is that the study plan should really be personalized. So I'm going to give you a pretty specific study plan. I believe that most people should adopt the gist of the study plan, but exactly when it comes to the particular details, that is something you guys should really do on your own. That is one of the reasons that we put our study plans on Excel, and we want people to manipulate them. I'm even going to show you total number of hours. Okay, so that's how specific I'm going to get in the study plan. All right, so let's have a look at the study plan. Let me just load it. Okay, so you should see now the study plan in front of you. I purposely started the study plan in February. That's really at the time of this video. And the basic gist of the study plan is that you're doing two things before Capstone One. Number one, you're reviewing your technical. And number two, you're going to be practice case writing. So for example, if I take, I don't know, just take any week here. If I take the week of February 12th to 18th, I'm going to do a little bit of financial accounting technical in that week, and I'm going to write 2 cases. Now, where are the cases I'm going to write? So you don't want to write the CFEs because those are going to be written at Capstone 2 in the summer. So what you want to do, we only have 4 years. So what you want to do is you want to write some UFI questions, notwithstanding the fact that, as we say somewhere else in the lecture, that there are differences between the UFI and the CFE. The multis are close enough that it makes sense to practice in some of these. So if you take the week of February 12th to 18, you'll see I'm writing 2 UFI questions, one from 2010, paper 3, question 1, and one from 2013, paper 3, question 3. How long is this? What's my time commitment? Well, we'll talk about this separately afterwards on debriefing. But an 80-minute question is really a time commitment of approximately 160 minutes. Because what you're doing is you're writing the question for 80 minutes, and then you're going to debrief the question. And that could easily take you as long as writing, another 80 minutes. There are some people that even spend double the amount of time. So for debriefing, they would spend 160 minutes. Let's assume you're spending an equal amount of time of writing and debriefing. So one question is 160 minutes if it's 80 minutes. Another question, if it's 90 minutes, it's about 180 minutes. It's 3 hours of time. So this gives you an idea, excuse me, this gives you an idea of how long you're spending on the actual case writing. For the technical, that's going to depend, but I even have hours, which I'll show you in a few minutes, on how long you're spending on that. So this might be a little aggressive, but I'm suggesting that people write a couple of cases a week and do some technical studying. You could be looking at, I don't know, 7 to 10 hours a week on studying. That's really what you could be looking at here when you start adding up the hours. Now, obviously, people, you don't have to do both cases in one night. You could even write the case one night, spend 80 minutes, and then the next night you could debrief. No one says you have to debrief exactly on the same night that you write. Okay, so this can obviously be spread out. You can also just write one case during the week if you don't have time to write 2 cases. So obviously you can play this by ear, but this is what you're doing up really until Capstone 1. So if I look at the next page, I'm now into April. Let me just make sure that that makes sense. I'm now into April. Yes, I'm now into April, March 26th, April 1st. And now I go to the next page of the study plan, April 2nd, okay, 9. All right, so we have our course thrown in here, which we'll talk about afterwards. But basically, you're really doing the same thing right up until Capstone 1. Capstone 1 begins around May 12th. That's when Capstone 1 begins. That's the 2 days. So along comes Capstone 1, and you've now have a lot of case writing under your belt. You've reviewed a lot of your technical, and now you're entering into Capstone 1. When you're in Capstone 1, I am assuming you are not doing anything else. If you're not working, the truth is that you should have time to do other case writing, and you would have to adjust the study plan. Because right now, I'm assuming all you're doing is Capstone 1 for the whole week. If you're working, there's no way you'll have time to do anything else besides Capstone 1 and work. Capstone 1 could be 15 hours a week. Very few people will do anything besides Capstone 1. What that means is that we lose you. What I mean when I say we lose you is basically from around middle of May, from May 12th onwards, all the way until that first week in July, all the way until the first week of July. You can see right over here, you're not going to be doing anything to prepare for day 2 and day 3 of the CFE. You're only going to be doing Capstone 1 because your presentation will be somewhere around that first week. They'll give you a date, and you'll do it with your group around July 7, 8, 9, something like that. And that's it. You're only going to be doing Capstone 1, and Capstone 1 only prepares you for day 1 of the CFE. That is why it is very important to start case writing before Capstone 1, because from middle of May all through June and the first week in July, you're basically only preparing for day 1 of the CFE. After Capstone 1, you will have 2 weeks off. That's purposely why we start our comprehensive course here. And then Capstone 2 is going to start. Capstone 2 will start around July 21st. Again, it's going to be a 2-day session, Saturday, Sunday. Capstone 2, every week, they're going to give you some practice questions, probably old CFEs. You'll write them, you'll hand them in, you work on your own. There's no pass or fail. And you're doing that all the way up until the CFE. And we have our course that spreads out, which we run both in class and live online, that you can take our course in addition to, while you're writing Capstone 2. So throughout the summer, what you're doing is you're continuing writing cases. You're continuing to do a little review of technical. So you're still doing that. And you keep writing cases. And Capstone 2 goes up until about a week before the CFE. And the CFE is September 12th to 14th. And that's what you're doing in the summer. Now, again, people, this is really made for you to personalize. So if you have time off in the summer, some students have time off, or you're not working, obviously you'll be able to write more cases. You have to adjust the study plan. But if you're working right up until a week or 2 weeks before, then this study plan, you won't have to adjust as much. But, it's really going to be a function of how much time off you have in those key weeks leading up to the CFE. If you want to get a quick view, if you want to have a quick view as to the hours, and again, I'm always very hesitant to actually show this because it really is obviously a guess on my part. I divided it up into the different segments. I started off, you can see, from February 5th to April 1st. I have hours here for all the multis you're writing. That includes the debriefing. I've got hours here for technical studying. So if you want to know how many hours am I putting in, you can see that here. And then segment 2 from April 2nd, okay, this has to do with our course. I put that in here. And then from mid-April till May 11, a little more technical studying, another 4 weeks. So I've got this all broken up. I put Capstone 1 by itself, approximately 120 hours, let's say, over 8 weeks. Okay, again, you're talking approximately 15 hours a week. And then you have your summer. And then I broke it down. So if you want to see the total, if you really want to see the total number of hours, I even broke it down for you. It's 434 hours. And I even broke it down here and I summarized, how much the courses are, how much the case writing is, how much the technical is. And then I'm telling you at the bottom here, this is what you're ending up writing. So again, look, I only do this because we get asked the question so many times, how many hours should I spend? And this is something where we really put a lot of thought into this and said, okay, this we think is reasonable. But take it with a bit of a grain of salt. Obviously, you have to personalize this. Everybody has different situations. You may be stronger in some technical areas. You may spend less time. You may be weaker in some. You may spend more time. Obviously, this has to be massaged to your particular situation. That's the whole idea with the study plan. You put it in Excel. You guys can basically play with this on your own and make it, and really make it work. But I think it's nice to have a study plan. It just keeps you focused. You know how many exams you want to cover. You know how many UFEs, how many CFEs, obviously the last 4 years. And it just gives you a very, I just think it gives you a very nice roadmap between now and the CFE, just because it's a long time. And you want to make sure that you're using your time in the wisest of ways. Okay, so I hope everybody found that useful. And that is our study plan.
Part 4 of the presentation deals with how to debrief a case effectively. We are going to be presenting a separate video on debriefing cases. We would suggest that you watch that video prior to writing your first case, as in order to derive a full benefit from writing cases, absolutely essential that you do an effective debriefing. So again, that will be the subject of a separate video. What I would like to discuss now is, who are we? Who is PAST? You've met Ira, you've met me. We're the co-directors of PAST. I'd like to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do. Our organization, PAST, began offering UFE courses, which again was a predecessor exam to the CFE, in 1989. So as you can imagine, we've got a lot of experience with preparing students for an accounting exam. First the UP and then the CPA. It's over 25 years of experience. I think we're recognized for our expertise. We've taught courses in all of the big four firms. We've also taught courses in mid-sized firms. Our courses are offered literally across Canada. We do the national CP program for PwC. I'm a co-director of PASS, as I mentioned a moment ago. When I wrote my UP, I was the Ontario Gold Medalist. We tend to use people with very, very good experience. Our markers are all very experienced. Some of them have actually marked the UP, others have marked the CP. So again, these are people with really, really good experience. And overall, we've had very, very good feedback from the students that we've taught, both international students as well as Canadian students. What I'd like to spend a few minutes on now is describing the PASS International CP program. What we decided to do a number of years ago is put together a course or program specifically designed to meet the needs of international CAs. We found when we started to meet with international CAs that they had two primary needs that needed to be fulfilled if they are going to pass the CP. One is technical and one involves case writing. On a technical level, what we discovered very quickly is that there are two issues a typical international student faces. The more obvious of the two issues is that their training is sometimes, or in many instances, or pretty much in almost all instances, did not include certain areas that you need for this exam. Typically, an international student has not studied Canadian tax. An international student has not studied ASPE, which are accounting standards developed in Canada for private enterprises. So number one, we need to bring international students up to speed in areas they never covered at home. But even in the areas that a typical international student did cover at home, such as finance, management accounting, where the material is pretty much identical to Canada, many of our international students completed their studies for their CA many, many years ago. I'd say our average international student wrote his or her CA probably 7 to 10 years ago, some people even more than 10 years ago. So another reason why it's so much important for us to cover the technical is even those areas that the typical international student did cover when he or she studied for the CA exam back home, they've forgotten it already. You know, I know if I wrote an exam even 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago, I'd forget the technical pretty quickly. So number one, we need to bring everybody up to speed from a technical perspective. Number two, and this is equally important, maybe even more important, we have found that with most international CAs, and I'm hesitant to generalize because there are many countries involved, but for most of the international CAs that we deal with, they did not write a case-based exam when they did their CA in their home country. Therefore, we need to provide very intensive training for you on case writing, because unlike Canadian students, you don't have that same level of experience. And I mentioned that earlier in the presentation. So let me explain to you what we've included in our course in order to give international students a really good shot at passing the CP. Number one, we've got a technical study binder and videos that covers 5 out of 6 of the competencies. Bottom line is what we tell our international students to do is to go through the study binder. If there are any areas they're comfortable with that they think they know well, there's no need to listen to the videos. Those areas where they feel they need assistance, please do listen to the videos. There are many, many videos you have access to covering a multitude of topics. Please go over those videos that deal with areas that you're not 100% comfortable in. A second very important component of our course is our Financial Accounting IFRS ASPE Review course. That's a live course students can either take in class or live online that covers all major areas of financial accounting. So these two components together basically will bring you up to speed from a technical perspective. You can't write a case effectively if you don't have the technical base. Now, the second issue, as I mentioned earlier, is teaching international students how to write CP cases effectively. We have 2 courses that address this. Number one, we've got our intro case writing course, which is a short case writing course we offer starting in the spring in April, where basically we give you a 2-hour session on how to write CP cases, and then you write 4 cases which get professionally marked and which we would then take up. And then we have our major case writing course, our summer comprehensive case writing course, which is a very, very intensive course that you would begin after Capstone 1. I'll describe this in more detail in just a moment. Something we added for the first time this year based on what we think is an important need is increased personal counseling sessions. Part of the program for international CAs includes personal counseling sessions where you'll be meeting one-on-one with the individual who marked your exam. I don't believe that there is any other organization out there that provides everything you see here on this slide. There are other organizations there is one organization that provides something equivalent to our summer comprehensive case course, basically a case writing course. There definitely is an organization that does that. There's another organization that provides personal counseling and technical videos. But if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty certain I'm not mistaken, we're the only organization that provides technical, both videos as well as live training, an intensive case writing course, as well as personal counseling. So an intensive case writing course where we actually take up cases with you in addition to marking them, and personal counseling. Why do we include so much? Because we truly believe that the international CA requires all of this. We do not include this much in any other course that we provide in our organization to any other audience. But based on our years of experience working with international CAs, we truly believe they require all of these components. Because the PASS course is so extensive, it isn't inexpensive. I'll be quite honest with you. It's $19.95, which is more than what you would pay for the course you take with the other organizations. However, it includes a great deal more. And again, it includes what we really truly believe you require. Now, we understand that with some international CAs, there can be cash flow issues involved. We're always very, very flexible in working with students to come up with some sort of installment plan that will suit your cash flows. So we don't want anybody to not be able to take this course when it's so important for getting through the exam just because their cash flows don't allow for it. So we can be very, very flexible on that. If there are any students who, even with help with an installment plan, simply cannot afford the course, you do have the option of taking just the summer comprehensive course, which would be comparable to what you would get with one of our competitors. And it would actually cost a little less than what you pay there. But again, we don't recommend that. If at all possible, we'd rather work with you and make it possible for you to take the full program, because we truly believe that you've got a much, much better shot at passing this exam if you take the full program. Let me now just give you a little bit more detail on each of the components of the PASS program for international CAs. Bottom line is, because many people have learned their technical many years ago, in our technical study binder, we cover, as I say, all of the competencies, technical study binder and videos. We cover all of the competencies other than financial accounting, which is covered in a separate course. And again, please go through those areas that you need to familiarize yourself with. I think most of our students go through the whole binder, and most of our students listen to as many videos as possible. One of the areas that I think where you'll find a lot of help will be on tax, but as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, again, only go over those tax videos and those tax notes that are important for day 3, assuming you have not chosen tax as your depth area. Then we've got the financial accounting course. That's a live course. As I mentioned before, you can take it in class or live online. With a live online course, we create a virtual classroom in which you can ask questions or answer questions. The in-class course is typically down at the University of Toronto and would work very well for people who live in Toronto or the GTA area. In addition to reviewing all of the difficult accounting topics, we also utilize 2 large cases to give you a chance to learn how to apply the technical knowledge you learn in this course to something similar to a CP case. Then we've got the Intro to Case Writing course, which, as I mentioned before, starts in the spring. Gives you a chance to get an early start on case writing. You've got a presentation on how to write CP cases, and then 4 exams or 4 cases that you write, professionally marked and debriefed. And later on, I was going to talk about personal counseling. 2 of the personal counseling sessions where the marker meets with you to go over your exam would take place while you're doing this intro to case writing course. Very important to get an early start on case writing, particularly for international CAs. The main course, the biggest course and most intensive course or component that's included in this program for international CAs is what we call our PASS comprehensive course. And this includes both practice case writing and technique sessions. Practice case writing is 5 days. You've got 1 day dedicated to how to write cases effectively to get the depth you need to get competent, what's called getting competent, which is necessary for passing the exam. You write 5 multi-simulations. You also write and get marked 2 comps. At the end of the day, we have debriefings on all of the on 4 of the multi-simulations, and 2 of the comps, where either I or myself typically would, in a classroom setting or a live online setting, or if you prefer video in a video setting, would go over the exam and how to approach it. In other words, we walk through the case and explain to you how to attack the case. And then you'll have 1 personal counseling session on one of the exams that you write in the comprehensive course. You'll get a very extensive binder that will include both cases as well as solutions, guides, and various take-up material. We're also going to give you a detailed marking guide publication if you want to be able to write OVUPs that give you detailed guides that you can use to mark yourself. I mentioned that the comprehensive course also includes technique sessions. In the technique sessions, you're not actually going to write cases, but you're going to learn how to effectively apply different areas or different technical areas to CP cases. In the numerical methods session, we're going to focus on how do I perform my quants quickly enough and effectively enough to do well on the quantitative aspects of the CP. The CP is a very quantitative exam. Historically, pretty much all of the multis had quants on them, and you've got to learn how to get through the quants very quickly so you get through them in the requisite period of time, because these cases are very, very time constrained. Numerical methods will focus on that. In our depth in financial accounting and integrated audit, we will give you proven techniques for ensuring you get enough depth in financial accounting and audit in order to do well enough to pass. And then finally, in integrated tax, that's the only technique session that might get a little bit technical because it's hard to avoid that with tax. But effectively, what the instructor will do is go over all the various types of scenarios that can come up in tax on day 3 and how to attack the various tax scenarios that typically come up. And then finally, the 5th component is personal counseling. As I mentioned earlier, the personal counseling session, the marker will get together with you or through Skype and will review with you your exam. They'll explain to you what you need to do to improve. And again, you'll have 2 opportunities to have a counseling session for 2 of your cases that you write in the intro course that starts in April, as well as 1 opportunity in the summer comprehensive course. I realize that what I've just shown you is very, very intensive, but frankly, you need something intensive if you want a good shot at passing the CP. Now, we try to provide a lot of flexibility with our courses. Some of our courses are provided both in class as well as live online. For the IFRS ASPE course, as well as for the comprehensive course, you've got both options. Some people prefer the in-class option. Some people prefer live online, particularly if they're too far to come to the in-class sessions, which are in downtown Toronto. But we do our best for the live online sessions to simulate the classroom. So again, as I mentioned earlier, in the live online sessions, you can ask questions, you can answer questions. It really is like a classroom. It's just a simulated virtual classroom. Now, the nice thing about PASS is all of our sessions are videotaped. So at the end of the day, if you miss any classes or you attend a class that you didn't quite catch everything and you want to review it, you have a video of every class. So you'll never have to worry about missing a class. You'll never have to worry if you miss something in a class and you didn't quite get it. You can always go back to the video. Another thing we do in order to be as flexible as possible is we don't discourage you from moving between the various venues. So you can register for an in-class course, but say you can't make some of the in-class sessions and you don't want to do video, you'd rather have something live. For those sessions you don't attend in class, you would do live online. And vice versa, the same would be true if you registered for a live online course, but you wanted certain classes in class. For those classes, you come to the in-class. So we're trying to be as flexible as we absolutely can be. I just want to share with you what some of our students have said about the past course. Again, I'm not going to read these slides to you, but you might just want to take a look at them. You can see that a number of our students, and again, these are international students, found our courses, very, very helpful. You've got here a comment by a fellow named, again, his name was actually Dave Bavin. Here you've got another testimonial. Again, I'll let you read these testimonials at your leisure, but I think you'll get the impression that these students found the past course to be extremely, extremely instrumental in getting them through the CP. So I would suggest that you take a look at these testimonials. The last thing I'd like to address, and this should just take 2 minutes, is some people may be wondering, why not just rely on CPA Canada for my CPA prep? I'm going to go to Capstone 1, I'm going to go to Capstone 2. Even those students who are exempt from that, for example, there is an MOU with Pakistan that exempts students from Capstone 1 and 2, even those students are encouraged to go. So assuming you go to Capstone 1 and 2, why do you need additional prep? So I'll explain why I think it's so important. Number one, you need more feedback than what you would typically get from Capstone 2. Capstone 2 is basically practice case writing, but there are a limited number of exams that are written and marked. And what PASS will do is give you a lot more opportunity to write more cases and have them marked professionally, so you can really hone your case writing skills. As I mentioned earlier, international students typically have had far less experience with case writing than their Canadian counterparts. So they need a lot more case writing training than what you're going to get in Capstone 2. Remember, a typical Canadian student, by the time he gets to Capstone 2, he's already done extensive case writing. He or she has either done a university accredited program, or they've gone through PEP, which involves Module 1, which involves Core 1, Core 2, and the elective. So they've already got a lot of case writing ability. You're starting, for many people, more or less from scratch. So you definitely will need more practice in case writing than what you would get from simply attending Capstone 2 that is put on by CPA Canada. And another nice thing about taking a course in addition to Capstone 2 is you're not just going to be writing additional cases at PASS, but you're also going to have very helpful take-ups. Usually Ira or myself do the take-ups, where we can really demonstrate for you how to write the cases effectively. We're going to be debriefing 4 of the multis plus 2 of the comps. We also employ markers who we insist provide our students with really good constructive feedback. Quite honestly, there are many, many markers who want to work for PASS. So we can be extremely selective in who we choose. And we will only use markers who provide extensive constructive feedback when they mark your exam. So you're not just going to get back exams that say you got mark X, but there'll be lots of qualitative feedback that you can build on to improve on the next case. We also have these technique sessions I described earlier, which again, you're not going to get through CPA Canada. And then finally, CPA Canada isn't going to provide you with technical prep. They are exempting you from Core 1, Core 2, and the electives on the assumption that you know all of your technical already. The problem is, as we mentioned earlier, many people don't know all of their technical. Some of it they never learned, like tax and ASPE. Other stuff they learned and forgot. So of course, if you just rely on CPA Canada, you'd have to learn all of the technical on your own, which I would think would be a daunting task. So at the end of the day, I would strongly encourage you to take Capstone 2 very seriously and to get out of it as much as you can. But keep in mind it only requires 10 to 15 hours per week, and I would definitely supplement it with another course if you want a really good chance at passing the CP. I hope you enjoyed the presentation we've just gone through. What are some of the important points that I'd like you to take away from our discussion? Number one, if there's one theme I'd like to leave you with, you have to really, really work hard on learning how to write cases effectively. That means not only writing a lot of cases, but starting as early as possible. Number two, please write every case we give you. If you attend the PASS course, don't only write half the cases, write every case. We've given you a lot of cases to write because we know you need a lot of practice. If you only write a fraction of the cases, you greatly, greatly reduce your probability of passing. I'll be entirely honest with you. Sometimes when Ira and I speak to students who did not pass the CP, we ask them, how many of the past cases did you write? And invariably the answer is, oh, I only got to some of them because I was too busy. If that happens, you greatly diminish, your chance of passing greatly diminished. Same thing is true with Capstone 2. We've spoken to students who did not fully write all of their Capstone 2 cases. Big mistake. Capstone 2, you're going to be writing old CP cases. That is excellent practice for the CP. Very important that you write and submit these cases. Make sure to spend the proper amount of time on each case. If it's a 90-minute case, they will tell you how many minutes to spend on each case, whether it's a PASS case or a Capstone case. Write it for the number of minutes that is prescribed. If it's a 90-minute case, don't just spend 45 minutes on it and say, oh, I'm spinning my wheels now, I guess I'll stop. If it's a 90-minute case, write for 90 minutes. If it's an 80-minute case, write for 80 minutes. Don't spend more time, don't spend less time, spend exactly the prescribed amount of time. If you really, really want to improve on your case writing, not just good enough to write cases, but you've got to debrief them effectively so that you're continually improving. In the next video, I will provide detailed instruction on how to effectively debrief a case. You may want to hold off watching that video until you're ready to write your first case. You're welcome to watch it now, but you may want to hold off until you're ready to write your first case. And then finally, keep notes as you write cases. I'll explain more what type of notes you should be keeping when we do the debriefing session, but these notes are going to be very important for you to utilize when you're getting closer to your CP and trying to prepare effectively. If you're interested in registering for the course for international CAs, very easy to register. You can just go to our website, passyourcpa.ca, and you can register online. Now, if you'd like to pay in installments, please contact Ira or myself prior to registering so we can make an arrangement with you. You're going to see our contact information on the website. Our contact information is also in this PowerPoint. Please give us a call and we'll discuss your payment plan prior to registration. Admission's on a first-come, first-served basis, so there's no particular deadline, but the earlier you register, the better. And quite honestly, you don't just want to register early to ensure you get a place in the course. You want to register as early as possible because you need to get started. If you register now, we can give you your binder pretty much immediately, your technical binder, and you can get an early start. You need that early start. Furthermore, keep in mind that the IFRS ASPE course, we're now at the beginning of February, starts already a little after mid-February. And if you register much later, you're going to miss part of the program. So at the end of the day, very important to register sooner rather than later in order to give yourself as much opportunity as possible to prepare. Now, if you're in the middle of registering with CPA Ontario, you've submitted your application, but you're waiting to hear back from them, please don't allow that to delay registering and getting started on your studying with PASS. You do not have to be registered with CPA Ontario before you register with us. It'll be a real pity, let's say it takes another month for them to complete your registration. Let's say they only complete it at the end of February. It would be a real pity to miss a whole month of preparation while you're waiting. So we would strongly encourage you to register and get started with the PASS program while you're waiting for CPA Ontario to complete your application, to complete the review of your application. Okay, once you register, right away, we'll be happy to look at your study plan. Ira went over with you how to prepare a study plan. So at the end of the day, we're happy to meet with you and go over your study plan with you. You don't have to meet with us, but we certainly encourage it. We'll be able to give you the technical binder and access to the videos as soon as you register. So again, you can get started immediately, and then of course you proceed on to the courses. As I said, please feel free to contact us if you'd like an installment plan. Also, please feel free to contact us if you'd just like to discuss the course further before registering. Even if you'd like to meet with us, we'd be very happy to meet with you to discuss your preparation for the CP anytime. Just give us a call and we'll arrange an appointment. I'd like to end by thanking everybody